Hello, flat earthers. I've just recently weighed in on this debate of flat earth versus spinning globe earth. And what I've tried to do in two previous videos is to show that both are right. There is a concept in particle physics that says the electron or the photon, they are both waves and particles at the same time. It depends on how you're looking at it and what measuring instrument you're using. So remember in my last video I said what flat earthers are forgetting is that there is a flat plane of Earth, just like atoms are flat, but there's also motion. And here we've got it. This is one of the most magnificent flat earth documentaries I've seen. And these particular scientists have created this model of tracking the sun and the photons coming through at various times during the year, and then they've fed the data into a machine to create the pulsing vortex of how photons operate within our universe. And that's the motion. That doesn't exclude that there's a flat earth. And in this video, I'm going to show you how. And there's that beautiful torus effect. This is a very exciting video, and I think it's brilliant. Movement, the motion of nature. These images are incredible. Here we go. There's that spiral. Doesn't that look like an insect of sorts? I think we can find those at the Nazca lines. Anyway, there's the torus. Just what modern physics is showing and modern mathematics. Just recently, a new field of mathematics emerged when a certain physicist discovered that a diagram, this is the diagram right here, it's a torus, done in the mid-19th century, represented the interactions of the atom and the method in which light travels through the atom. So the basic description, the Lie group E8 dimension are 248. Very important numbers. Its rank, which is in dimensions of maximal torus, is 8. Therefore, the vectors of the root system are an 8-dimensional Euclidean space. What does Euclidean space mean? It means flat space. But remember, it's 8 dimensions of flat space interacting. They are described explicitly later in this article. Well, we don't really need to go on because I think the diagram, let's see, take a look here, says it all. Look at that beautiful torus. And this was diagrammed in the mid-19th century. And only recently a physicist discovered or proved the theory that this is a representation of the interacting fields within the atom or the photon. So here's another diagram on the Wikipedia page. This is a 3D projection using the basis vectors having H3 symmetry. And again, can you see the permutations going on there? And that's an 8-dimensional flat surfaces interacting. Again, a torus effect. So as we go down, I just want again to demonstrate or show that Wilhelm Killing, approximately 1888, discovered the complex Lie algebra E8 during his classification of simple compact Lie algebra. Though he did not prove its existence, which was shown by Élie Cartan, Cartan determined that the complex simple Lie algebra of type E8 admits 3 real forms. Each of them gives rise to a simple Lie group a dimension of 248, 24, 8. Okay, 12 houses of Israel, 24 elders within the universe. Okay, so exactly one of which is compact. Okay, so let's move on. The flower of life and lead geometry also brought me back to another ancient representation of nature, which has been deemed the flower of life. So I looked up the flower of life in Wikipedia, and here it says, again, denigrating ancient knowledge, the flower of life, a name in New Age literature for a geometric pattern consisting of overlapping circles. Yes, but it also is all the way through the ancient world, these representations of this flowering effect or torus effect represents nature. So here we have the overlapping circles grid. It's a grid of geometric patterns repeating overlapping circles of equal radii in two-dimensional space, again flat space. Common designs are based on circles centered on triangles with the simple two circles forming the vesica Pisces, or what we could call this vessel in the center of everything. The vesica Pisces is that deep space within everything. They are found, these vesica Pisces, or these circles, overlapping circles, they are found in crypto-archaic cup of the 8th and 7th century BC in Cyprus, the Temple of Osiris in Abydos, Egypt, on Roman mosaics, for example, Herod's palace of the 1st century, etc. So then even Wikipedia starts to describe each of these triangular geometric grids in two-dimensional space. Triangular grid overlapping there in circles, historical occurrences. Here's the 19th circle hexagonal variant, and you can see that it is this one right here is the Slavic solar symbol. This is mosaic from Herod's temple right there in the center. Let's see, take a look. The 19th circle is found in Abydos, Egypt. That's quite a long time ago. And the 19th circle grid is found in Ephesus, Turkey, which I visited. It's just a lovely ancient place. And I realize I digress now, but that Cleopatra and Mark Antony visited Ephesus before the war with Rome and Caesar Augustus started. They needed the Mediterranean world to back their efforts to unify the Mediterranean and not divide it like the Roman Senate wanted after they assassinated her husband, Julius Caesar. Okay, similar patterns, it goes all the way through here. And then the modern usage is what we call the flower of life. And they do mention in here that, let's see, Drumballo Melchizedek popularized this flower of life. And so that made it new agey of sorts. But it simply occurs in every ancient civilization. And this is a representation here of 24 arcs. Now this is also a representation of cell division, hence the flower of life. 24 arcs. Here's 36 arcs. And as you go up, the progressions divide and become different elements on the element table. So you can see that ancients had a very deep knowledge of how the universe worked. And it is my belief, and I agree with some of the flat earthers who claim they are lying to us. Well, they have been lying to us, but they also have been hiding it in plain sight. The way that modern science has hidden the truth from us is it has segregated all the sciences. So the electricians don't know what the physicists are doing. The physicists don't speak the same language as the astronomers. They all have their different languages, and none of them are communicating. So the flower of life was a very important universal symbol used by the ancients in most of their sacred spaces, palaces. And here's the geometric flower of life as seen in modern geometry. Here it is in a Slavic solar symbol. And here's a mosaic floor in the bathhouse of Herod's palace, 1st century BCE. You see the pattern of the 19 circles continue as it is seen in the red ochre temple of Osiris at Abydos. It's a 19-circle flower of life etched into the granite. And again, a 19-circle flower of life at the southern apsis of Praveli Monastery in Crete. And here, the 19-circle flower of life is found at Ephesus, Turkey. That's the ancient city that Cleopatra and Mark Antony visited before the war with Caesar Augustus. And again, stopping with a Leonardo da Vinci drawing. Okay, we've discussed Lie geometry and the flower of life. What Lie geometry does not project, though, is the motion that the geometric patterns take, because within this colliding forces of the planes, they collide and then they expand and contract, expand and contract, and as they expand and contract, they make clock movements, or as Lie geometry would dictate, a spiral in 8 discrete dimensional planes. And each of these dimensional planes mirror the actual projection of the Earth. So the Earth is rotating in the spiraling fashion while it still is remaining flat. Remember the duality? Wave, particle. Is it a particle or is it a wave, the atom, or electron? Well, it's both. Depends on how you're measuring it and who is viewing it. So let's go with a little bit of this fellow's insight, which I believe is very insightful, because what he adds to the whole debate of flat Earth is the arcing effect, or the bending of the photons around the curvature of the Earth. And this is very important because this is part of general relativity, that conservation of energy dictates that a photon or any piece of matter or atom will take the path of least resistance. So when photons hit the Earth, which is a barrier, it's going to travel around the curvature of the Earth rather than go through it. So let's listen to this fellow for a while.
Came up with this movie called Magnetic Flat Earth 1.0, and it kind of went viral all over the place. Everybody mirrored it. And we got, obviously quite a few hits on ours, and Antonio, I think, got the most. But he kind of labeled it as Flat Earth Must See, so it didn't have the Magnetic Earth 1.0 on it. But this thing, needless to say, got 20-30,000 views almost instantly. And what it is, it's basically a model that is positing much of what I have talked about on Globebusters, what Chris Monk has talked about, and of course, also what Mike Cavanaugh, Steve Torrance, and Dr. Zach have been trying to model, for the past 2 years. And they go through and they explain why a lot of the models are not working properly, especially as far as sun and movements and what we're seeing. And as I have mentioned several times before, if you don't take factors like the Faraday effects and the magnetic bending of light into your model, then you have an incomplete model. These Faraday effects are absolutely very real. We've proven several times that that light does follow magnetic lines of force. We can see that in a ferrocell. You can see it in a ferrocell, and granted that has ferromagnetic fluid in it, but the atmosphere also has all these other gases and stuff in it, which combine to effectively bend light. This is why we have an apparent position of the sun instead of something that's actually real. In other words, I posited that the sun is 3,415.9 miles up, and it may be at its source. However, when you look at it at some points from the ground, it can look like it's actually only up above maybe 3 to 6 miles. And again, this is an apparent position that is being brought on by not only atmospheric lensing effects, but the fact that the light is being bent by the magnetic toroidal field around the Earth, which kind of gives you, and what these guys are saying, kind of your own personal view of a sun. And it's kind of akin to if you have two people standing on a beach and it's sunset and they're watching that line coming from the sun all the way to their feet, and you can have two people standing 25 feet away from each other, and both of them are seeing that same line coming directly to their feet, yet neither one of them can see the other line going to the other person's feet. Again, this is one of those very personal type of perspective things that's being brought on, and this is what we're actually dealing with when we're talking about the position of the sun and the moon, in my opinion. And I think that they're right on with this, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to plot this out and give us an idea of how the light is being brought to us, being disseminated not only through the atmospheric lensing and particulates and all the things that make the atmosphere do what it does, as well as the magnetic bending and Faraday effects and stuff like this. So when I saw this, I absolutely resonated 100%. It really made me feel good that somebody was looking at this very seriously and actually modeling it. And Steve Torrance has done a beautiful job in modeling it. Dr. Zach has been instrumental in it, and of course Mike Cavanaugh, who I honestly was not too familiar with before, but his channel is FE Astronomy, Flat Earth Astronomy. I'm absolutely loving the work that they did. And I think ultimately what it's going to render out into is exactly what they showed, this big toroidal field that is essentially bringing these unique perspectives to everybody in their own particular position around the plane. That sounds a little crazy, but I think that's kind of what they were going on, and I would love, honestly, to have them on. In fact, I know that Mike is in the chat. If you, Mike, Flat Earth Astronomy, would like to come on with Steve, hopefully Steve's internet connection is a little bit better this time. I'd love to have you guys on and go through this even more deeply, because like I said, it resonates very deeply with me, and it's what I've been talking about for nearly 2 years, and I was just blown away when I saw this. So, bravo on your attempts here, and I'm looking forward to seeing this develop.
Class in vortex-based mathematics. For those of you who are familiar with Marco Rodin's work, if you're not familiar, you should go and look up Marco's videos, study a little bit on his work. I'm also going to be having classes going up online that will start from much simpler and explain in much more detail how the math works. This is really intended to be for Marco, for more advanced students, people who are studying in the math. I've made a discovery that I believe completely revolutionizes and changes vortex-based mathematics, will change the designs of technologies based on vortex-based mathematics, and I'm actually claiming to have taken this math to a completely different level, which reveals what a true whole number fractal is and how to determine exactly its composition. So I'm just going to start from the beginning. You can see I have my symbol here. Those of you who are familiar with the work have seen the symbol. It's called the symbol of enlightenment. This is the petroglyph for the equation for the most great name of God from the Baha'i faith, Abha. Okay? I'm just going to do a quick, super fast run through of how it works. And those of you who aren't familiar, go check out the other videos as well. Okay, so we start with 9 at the top. We have a circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The 9, of course, never changes. No matter what you multiply 9 by, it always reduces back to equal the number 9. All numbers, as we do functions on this, are going to reduce back to single digits. Why? Because we're looking at the underlying pattern. Okay? So let's look at the first pattern we have. We know it's doubling. If I follow this pathway, 1 doubled is 2, 2 doubled 4, 4 doubled is 8, 8 doubled is 16, but 6 and 1 is 7, 16 doubled is 32, 33 plus 2 is 5, 32 doubled is 64, which comes back to 10, 1, 128, which equals back to 2, 256, 512. You can go on and on forever. It will always keep doubling. Most of you are familiar with that. You can half the other way. Half of 1 is 0.5. Half of 0.5 is 0.25. 2 and 5 is 7. Half of 0.25 is 0.125, which is 8. 0.0625, which is 4. On and on, you can half forever. So we have both doubling and halving. This is actually the way we're going to learn to measure things in the physical world. They always come in these groups of 6. Okay? Really based on 3, but we won't go into that. Then we have our 9, 3, and 6. We're familiar with this. 3 doubled is 6, 6 doubled is 12, which is 3, 12 doubled is 24, which is back to 6, 24 doubled is 48, back to 3, they are oscillating. The 9 never changes. It forms an axis, which polarizes all these numbers. Okay? You can look this up on Marco's video. Other thing what I'm doing here, just to explain, is accounting for everything that has to be present on a true torus. Okay? So when we start modeling a torus with this, I'm giving you all the principles. So first thing is we have to have unbroken multiplication tables. Okay? We have to have doubling. We have to have the halving. Okay? We have to have the 3, 9, and 6 gap space in between. Next thing we have to have is family number groups. Now again, I'm just going to use as an example a 36 by 18 torus. Okay? A 36 by 18 torus, I'm going to say now, and then when I finish explaining the 36 by 18, I'm going to just tell you the numbers on any given torus, so you can't just say that a 36 by 18 is not a valid torus. I'm saying that it is a valid torus, and that I can give you other examples. So instead of saying that the winding is going in here, and then coming back around here, and then winding many times, what I found is that there actually, on a 36 by 18 coil, there are actually 6 different nested vortice pathways, which means 12 circuits. So whereas the other coil I was showing is 2 circuits, I'm saying it's really 12 circuits. And it's the interrelation of these circuits that makes the spires sequence, okay, which will make the coil far more efficient. So here the pathway I'm showing you is actually the doubling circuits coming in this way, and they're coming back out here, directly across, back in, and then back around, so that this is an unbroken loop. Again, not breaking the initial principle of my symbol. The doubling circuits never break, okay? So it's an unbroken loop. Here's one directly opposed to it. So all in all, I'm going to have 6 groups, okay? 2 groups, each representing 12 groups is what I should say. No, I should say 6 groups is the right. I'm sorry, forgive me. I'm thinking of many different number toruses. So 6 groups on this torus. And I'm going to show that in a much better illustration and show you exactly how to calculate it so it's perfect. I'm also opening this up because I want people to critique the work, try and approach it and attack it from every angle, and see if you can prove whether or not I'm right or wrong. I know I've already done the work on paper.
This is a video called The Electromagnetism, the Glue of the Universe. And I'm going to provide a link below. But basically, this video found on the Discovery Channel or the Science Channel goes through and indicates how electromagnetism holds everything in the universe together, including the atom and including our galaxies, and basically states that without electromagnetism, the entire universe would explode or crunch, atoms wouldn't hold together, we would not even feel a ball in our hand. I think this video pretty well eliminates the fact that scientists believe there are various forces that aren't connected with electromagnetism, including gravity. Gravity is electromagnetic in nature, so is a strong force, so is a weak force, so is a nuclear force. They're all electromagnetic, even though they are called by different names. It's just a different language. It starts off by indicating that photons are particles of energy, and that without photons we would not be able to see our world. And then it goes to stating that this goes to the very heart of quantum mechanics, which includes magnetism at the subatomic level. Atoms would not hold together, photons would not be produced by the colliding electrons unless the entire universe and fabric of the universe was made up of an electromagnetic field. And it's across this electromagnetic field that all the action occurs. Now I'm going to introduce you to Max Planck. He won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1918, and what he discovered and is famous for is Planck's dimension and Planck time. And what is Planck's dimension and Planck time? He noticed that an electron or photon, they flash into view and then out of view, into view and out of view, like a pulsing light. And it's an electric effect, which is into view, and the pulsing light inward is the magnetic effect. And what he basically said is an atom exists and then it doesn't exist. At one moment it exists, and at another moment it rolls into the abyss for just an infinitesimal moment. And that moment, when the atom or the electron or the photon rolls into the abyss and out of view, he calls Planck's dimension. And what is a photon? Well, a photon is described as a particle or a packet or a standing wave of electrical energy. And it produces a particle effect or a burst. And what Max Planck determined was these bursting lines, or the momentum of a particle, whether it's an electron or whether it's a photon, does not travel in a smooth, unbroken line. As I said, it pulses into view and out, into view and out. And they call that rolling into the abyss, that Planck's dimension. And whatever dimension that goes to, it might go to all the elite 8 dimensions, I don't know. We haven't a clue because we can't measure it. But Planck's time is a very infinitesimal time. And it occurs, look at this, at 5.39 times 1 at a minus 44 seconds. I mean, that happens so, it's almost immeasurable. And I don't know how they measured it, but they also determined that the photon travels in the huge macro universe. This is the speed of light because it's jumping that fast. So it's not a smooth line. It jumps as it spreads throughout the universe. So a star has to reach us within, the speed of light. But the speed of light is determined by this quantity, where that light is not within our universe. It's in the abyss or a different dimension. So we're going to move on. Max Planck, after he studied physics, had some very interesting things to say. And I just want to point to them because he was a physicist and he was quite insightful and he was in awe of the universe. And one of the first things I think we all need to understand while we're trying to come together in some sort of agreed fashion and use terminology we all can agree on is that the new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. I think that's quite insightful. And then he also said, let's see, all matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume that behind this force, the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. And that happens to be the mind of God in my belief system. But let's move on. So far, we've been speaking about many different concepts. This discussion started out with my viewing the very beautiful documentary done by F.E. Astronomy, who tracked the movement of the light of the sun around the Earth, I believe, in a 36-day time period. And what they found was that there was a toroidal effect of the electrons. From there, I jumped to E8 or Lie geometry, which showed that a torus is also represented by the movement of light. And what E8 geometry shows is basically a projection of a very ancient concept called the flower of life. So we discussed the different basics of the flower of life, how it's based on intersecting circles, and this was known to the ancients as sacred geometry because they could see these geometric patterns all through nature, and so they documented how the geometry of nature worked. But of course, geometry does not give the entire story, because at the same time there is motion going on, and the geometry is just a motionless representation of the universe as it's popping into view, popping out of view, popping into view, and that's where we document the photons of electrons as they blink in and blink out. And to find in my discussion, I want to also introduce you to a scientist and a very, shall I say, important physicist called Carl Schwarzschild. And Carl Schwarzschild lived around World War II, and I feel he was a very sad, melancholy fellow because he was the person that was responsible for sending Einstein the mathematical calculations that went along with the general theory of relativity. And as the Wikipedia entry says, it says he was a German physicist and astronomer, and he provided the first exact solution to the Einstein field equations of general relativity for the limited case of a single spherical non-rotating mass, which he accomplished in 1915, the same year that Einstein first introduced general relativity. The Schwarzschild solutions, which makes use of Schwarzschild coordinates and the Schwarzschild metric, leads to a derivation of the Schwarzschild radius, which is the size of the event horizon of a non-rotating black hole. Did you get that? So now, on top of the electromagnetic forces and on top of the quantized particle physics and on top of the spiritual dimensions of the flower of life, we now have black holes thrown into the equation. And not only black holes, we're finding that it also includes white holes. So what makes him a particularly sad individual is that he was writing these equations down while he was in a bunker during World War I. And he died the following year while still on the war front of an autoimmune disease, it says. And I just find that very sad, that this brilliant man had come up with these brilliant solutions to Einstein's field equations, and then he died. I think that is terribly sad. But let's move on. So, turning to the Wikipedia page on the Schwarzschild metric, it indicates how this theory of relativity and the Schwarzschild solution kind of describe the gravitational field outside a spherical mass. So remember, it's outside a spherical mass or outside the torus or interior of the torus. It is, these are equations, again, that just map the coordinates, which is geometry, of the quantized universe or particle physics. And as we know, as I've restated, particle physics is only part of the story. So you can plot this Flamm's paraboloid with the equations and the coordinates, and it comes out like a tubular rotating figure of sorts. But what is very interesting is this particular comparison. Okay, the comparison between the orbit of a particle is on the left, but look, this is the particle as it is swirling around the coordinates. And what does it produce? I believe it's producing the flower of life. Yep, that's what it's producing, the flower of life. Well, is our universe and galaxy and Earth made up of particles or waves? Well, according to Max Planck, it's both. An electron can be both a particle, depending on when you're observing it, and a wave, depending on its momentum. But perhaps we are, again, not meeting our terms well enough, because physics is really dealing with the geometry of space, particle physics. It wants to track and diagram where those particles are arcing and moving. And electromagnetics is really dealing with the forces of nature. Electromagnetic charge blows up a tree in an electrical storm. Or if I get electrocuted, I can either die and explode my heart, or I can withstand it and, as they say, become psychic if I survive it. All right? That's what they say. And that might be true because you're getting a whole lot of charged photons. Again, the flower of life was a very important symbol to the ancients. We find the flower of life in a Leonardo da Vinci manuscript. We find it in the mythological scenes on a cup of a king vanquishing his enemies. This is from the 8th and 7th century BC in Cyprus. We find the flower of life in Bali, the imperial guardian lion at the gate of supreme harmony in the forbidden city of Beijing. It's a geometric pattern on the surface of a globe. And then we find it as a floor decoration in Iraq Palace. This is visible in the Museum of the Louvre, and it dates back to 645 BC. And again, here is the representation of the flower of life as it is drawn with a compass and a straight edge, which we know Masons are very adept at doing. And here is Topkapi Palace with the flower of life, and we can go on and on and on. And the original one, the original flower of life, probably the most ancient one, is found at the Abydos Egyptian Palace of Osiris. So here is an animation of the E8 field. And it interacts. The energy flows going in between the particles. producing permutations or excitations in the field of the universe. And when we see those excitations, we see light and we see matter. But it's the in-between state that we're not seeing, which are all the threading energy strings that you see there, feeding into the center and rotating, feeding into the center and rotating, feeding into the center. But you understand that this is a field of quantum mechanics or quantization. And quantum mechanics and particle physics, they don't talk to those in the electromagnetic field. They're using two different languages, but meaning the same thing. If I appear to be repeating myself, I am. There's a theory that states you have to repeat at least 3 times a new concept for someone to initially grasp it. But it takes many more times of repetition for the novice mind to understand. And my point in this whole presentation is basically to state that all the various fields of spiritual science, of physical science, of quantum mechanics, particle theory, electromagnetic wave theory, you're not communicating. You're using completely different language and then fighting among yourselves. Physicists scoff at anyone who believes the universe is sacred. The spiritual leaders scoff at science for being so reductionist and so materialistic. Well, the ancients did not see reality in such divisive terms. What ancient man saw was God created this universe and created this beautiful planet for us to exist on. And so to them, in order to know God, they had to study God's handiwork, which was nature itself. So science was the ancients' religion, because only through science could they know their true creator and perhaps someday reside with him. So let's move on to E8 geometry again. We just discussed the flower of life, Metatron's cube, etc., which is called spiritual science and which is called New Agey by Wikipedia. But I just want to show you these pictures of E8 geometry images. And look at them. Here's Metatron's cube. This is the flower of life at Abydos. Here's a Lie group geometry symmetry right here. And you can also figure out the tree of life of the Kabbalah right there in the center. But don't you see how nature and God are constantly telling us the truth? And yet we're ducking our heads and refusing to look up and see it. And we are dividing ourselves off from each other by not communicating, and our own personal narcissism of saying, I'm right and you're wrong. Well, it looks to me, once again, my premise or thesis is everyone's right. You just need to start speaking language that everyone can understand. This is the spinning, rotating energy that goes through the core of the Earth and comes out in counter rotations from the North Pole and the South Pole. They're mirror images. And remember, there was the event horizon. And the event horizon is coming up. And what is the Merkaba? It is considered the chariot of ascension. It is those rotating, spinning wheels within wheels of our body and in the earth and in the universe.
And so we come back to the pulsing
ascends
torus,
us to the higher
found
dimensional
and
planes.
concluded
And this is
by the
a
FE
lovely
Astronomy.
representation of the Merkaba.
Bravo.
And what does this torsion field produce? Well, it was discovered by the FE astronomers as they were charting the energy of the photons around the globe swirling in and out of view. And if their data is correct, it produced this beautiful pulsing torus.